Hey Liz, sorry, I don't know why I got in. I'm probably on Jessica's account, so I'm gonna leave and join as a participant.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to wait just a minute or two as people are starting to come into the room. It takes a minute or two, so we're just going to wait a minute or two. Good morning, everyone. We're going to wait just a minute or two and wait for the participants to come in. It takes a minute for everyone to get in. Okay, good morning, everyone. We will get started now, as I see where people are still going to be coming in to the session, but we're going to start. So, good morning. My name is Liz Hume. I'm the Executive Director at the Alliance for Peacebuilding. The Alliance for Peacebuilding is a membership-based organization of over 160 organizations working in 181 countries to build sustainable peace and reduce and prevent violent conflict. So we're thrilled today, AFP is thrilled to host the public launch of the State Department's Negotiation Support Unit, the NSU. So the acronym, the NSU, is a team of peace process and negotiation experts in the Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations, CSO, that will provide tailored support to U.S. diplomats engaged in peace processes and complex political negotiations at every stage of track 1, 2, and 3 processes. They'll provide assistance from strategic planning, operational, through implementation, both organizationally and technically. So why is this so critical? Because this unit will help push forward the agenda on conflict prevention and ending violent conflict, so that we can assist in building sustainable peace. We've hit a 30-year high on global violent conflict, and this was even before the Ukraine war. Climate change, COVID-19, technology, they're all compounding violent conflict. And you know, I can't be somewhere without talking about the Global Fragility Act. Everyone wants to focus on the programming side of the GFA, the development programming that is, will add more funding on conflict prevention and peace building. But a big part of the GFA goes to what I keep reminding everyone is that the GFA is also about changing the way that we do diplomacy in conflict affected and fragile states differently. So we need to make sure that diplomacy is connected with peace building and conflict prevention programming. And I'm confident that this unit will be a critical step forward in changing the way the US does business, preventing conflict, ending violent conflict, and building sustainable peace. So again, considerable added value to the State Department and so needed now. So I'm going to give you a quick run of the show. Assistant Secretary for CSO Ann Wachowski will give a few opening remarks. Dive right into a deep discussion with Deputy Undersecretary Ariel Ekbal and the whole a bunch of the NSU team. I promise that we'll have time for Q&As, so please feel free to drop questions in the chat box throughout, and we'll get to as many as we can. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce Assistant Secretary Wachowski, and I don't think she needs any introduction, but I'm going to go over some of her incredible parts of her bio. So we were thrilled when she was finally sworn in as the Assistant Secretary for CSO on January 10th, 2022. And since then, she has hit the ground running. She previously served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Stability and Humanitarian Affairs from 2014 to 2016 in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. the U.S. Department of Defense, DoD. Prior to that, she served in the U.S. Department of State as the acting principal deputy coordinator in the Bureau of Counterterrorism and the CT deputy coordinator for Homeland and Multilateral Affairs. She holds a BA in Russian and Eastern European Studies from Yale University and an MPA with a concentration in international security from Harvard University, John F. Kennedy School of Government, and she is the recipient of the State Department Superior and Meritorious Honor Awards, the Department of Defense Medal for Distinguished Civilian Service, and the Secretary of Defense Medal for Outstanding Public Service. Thank you so much. And I want to hand it over to you.
Liz, thank you so much for that incredibly warm welcome. I'm incredibly happy to be here today. Good morning, everyone. Liz, I too very much appreciate the connection you've made between what we are going to be discussing today, what the team is going to be discussing today, and the Global Fragility Act and its mandate for conducting diplomacy, whole of government engagement in a different way going forward. But for today's event, Liz, I just want to thank you very much, Megan Corrado, and the entire Alliance for Peace Building for hosting the event. We are so pleased to share with you the public launch of the State Department's new Negotiations Support Unit, or as Liz has said, the NSU, which is a team of subject matter experts who advise our diplomats and policymakers on negotiations and peace processes. The State Department has top-notch negotiators who have brokered peace agreements successfully. But in our team's outreach with senior diplomats, they have noted that even the most experienced negotiators might only engage in a few major negotiations during their careers. To paraphrase one senior official, it is a diplomat's job to know the people, the region, and the politics, but we can benefit from experts inside the department to help us think through negotiations. The NSU addresses this challenge by offering a permanent team whose sole purpose is to provide expert technical advice on peace processes and complex political negotiations. Looking just at the last few months, our negotiations experts have contributed to U.S. engagement in peace processes and complex political negotiations around the world, including in Ethiopia, Yemen, Sudan, Georgia, and Venezuela. And I do not need to tell this audience that, in fact, the conflicts that are growing around the world and the complexity of the associated negotiations are simply increasing. Now, some of you may ask, what does negotiation support look like at the State Department? Let me say a couple of words, and you'll hear more in the course of today's panel. Negotiation support includes tailored advice and analysis on negotiations process, including strategy, process design, and participation. It also includes support on substantive aspects of negotiations and peace talks, issues such as ceasefires, power sharing, community protections, state structure, security, and transitional justice arrangements. This unit, this NSU, is about distilling knowledge from negotiations worldwide, our lessons, and applying those lessons to specific problem sets in ways that are most useful to our principals and interlocutors. This team has experience working on negotiations at all levels, including formal and informal talks, major peace summits, track 2 dialogues, and broad public consultations. The NSU is currently working on substantive issues such as drafting and reviewing ceasefire agreements, advising on process design and inclusion strategies, and so much more. And again, I hope you'll be excited to hear more through the conversation this morning. We are very pleased to be here publicly launching this unit and look forward to developing robust and ongoing engagement with you in the community of practice. And I just want to underscore that. We really look forward to this ongoing engagement with all of you. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn this back over to Liz Hume and Deputy Assistant Secretary Ariel Ekblad to kick off the conversation. Liz, back to you.
Thank you so much. And I again, want to thank you, CSO, for its incredible partnership and collaboration on all things conflict prevention and peace building. So we're grateful for all of your work as well. So we're going to get right into this incredible conversation. I first want to introduce Deputy Assistant Secretary Ariel Ekvald and the whole NSU team. So what do we say about the Deputy Assistant Secretary? She once again also hit the ground running, and we are just thrilled with the work that she's been doing at CSO. But before that, or at CSO, she's been leading the Bureau's effort to anticipate, prevent, and respond to conflict and instability in Africa and Asia. She oversees the Bureau's Office of Design, Monitoring, and Evaluation. She was most recently, before joining CSO, she was the Chief of Staff in the office of Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and had been the National Security Legislative Counsel in the former Senate office for Vice President Kamala Harris. She previously served as a visiting seminar of a law professor at Georgetown University and taught negotiation and dispute resolution at the American University Washington College of Law. She is a Harvard graduate, Harvard Graduate School of Law, and well, she holds a JD from Harvard Law and a Master's of Science degree from University of Oxford and the University of London in Diplomacy and International Relations. She has both been a Marshall Scholar and United Kingdom and Fulbright Scholar in India, and was valedictorian of her class at Spelman College. So welcome. I also just want to introduce some of the NSU team as well. Megan Stewart. Megan is an advisor and team lead for the Negotiation Support Unit. She has over 20 years of experience working on peace negotiations and conflict resolution. And over the course of her career, has worked on over 30 peace processes. Prior to joining CSO, she worked in the Office of the Secretary of Defense and was Vice President of Legal Strategy at the Public International Law and Public Policy Group, PILPG. And I can tell you, I've known Megan for almost 20 years, and she has, this bio only begins to touch the work that she has done on peace processes all over the world. I also want to introduce Amy Breslau. Amy is an advisor for the NSU as well. She is a democracy and gender specialist and focuses on the durability and inclusivity of peace processes. She spent decades working with civil society and political parties around the world, with extensive field work in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia. And in my conversations with Amy, I know how dedicated and passionate she is about these issues. I'd also like to introduce Tyler Thompson. He's an advisor for the NSU. Tyler is an expert on peace processes and post-conflict transitions, and he previously served as USIP's senior expert on negotiations, and he's directed ceasefire practice at the Public International Law and Public Policy Group. I think everyone's worked for PILPG on these issues. They are a true leader, so I can't say enough about their incredible work as well. Okay, so getting right into our conversation here. I'm going to start and just start asking, just a few questions. What is it about NSU that's new for the department? What is going to be the value added? And what does this mean, as I said, for a different way of how you're going to be doing business at the State Department?
Well, I'll jump in here. Liz, thank you so much for this. Thank you, AFP, for hosting this public launch. I appreciate that the work that you all have been doing is just phenomenal, and it is wonderful to continue to work with you. So thank you for having us. Thank you for hosting us. It's an honor to be here. I will say up front that the team and I are going to we're going to volleyball back and forth because I believe in the collective brilliance of groups, and I really, really think the team has an immense amount to offer. And I will say, as a former Hill staffer who worked with a lot of principals, it's often the team that's sort of the muscle behind the effort anyway. So you want to hear from them, not from me. But first, Liz, in response to your question, I will say that, we all know that there's nothing new under the sun, right? People have been thinking about what this work would mean within the department, within the USG for a while now. But what the institutionalization of the NSU does, in my imagining, is it collapses a binary, and it might just be sort of a cognitive binary, but it is a binary nonetheless that I have observed within the building, within the USG writ large. And so in summation, it's often, there is this thought that if you have in-country or regional expertise, right, and then there is a conflict, the way to then go about engaging is to sort of pull together folks who have said expertise and then to engage in conflict resolution work. Here's the deal. Conflict resolution is also an expertise. I know the people who are listening here know that very well. And so what we're trying to do is operate at that nodal point, right? That axis between conflict resolution expertise and in-country/regional expertise, and support the people within the building who are engaging in negotiations to really engage hyper-intentionally in these conflict resolution processes, recognizing that there is an expertise to be called on. And we want to support the ongoing work of the building, the good work of the building, but making sure that we draw on the brilliance that you just outlined in this team to enhance the efforts of the department. So that, I think, is what makes this new and different. But I also want to invite Megan. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add here.
Yeah, I would just note, thank you so much for that, Ariel. And I just also want to offer my thanks to Alliance for Peace Building for hosting us today for this public launch as we get going. So again, thank you all so much for having us here today. I think that I would just add to Ariel's comments to say that in my experience previously working on peace negotiations, that the department worked more on an ad hoc basis, and they would, draw in experts and talk to people. But in each major negotiation and for processes, it was primarily ad hoc, and there wasn't a central unit like this in the department to provide this expertise. And so this unit, we talk about it as a swing capability. So, we go where we're needed, we work upon request, but the purpose is to have this permanent unit in the department that's staffed with negotiations and peace process experts, so that this process is less ad hoc as we move forward, and that our diplomats and our regional experts and the amazing people that we work with in the department have a place to go when they get started on these processes. So I think that permanence of the unit, as Ariel said, the institutionalization is what is really new about this. And so far, the response has been really positive to that. So we're really excited to continue to move this forward. Thank you.
Okay, so can I ask, just pull that thread a little bit. You talk about ad hoc, not being ad hoc, but it's not mandatory that regional bureaus or others would reach out to you. Are you doing through the at the State Department? Are you doing, I don't want to say a campaign, but get to know us and what we can do? I mean, how are you launching this within the State Department?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. So we, back in December, team, my mind is feeble. So I think it was December. Yeah, December of last year, we had an internal launch, and it was, I will just say for myself, it was immensely heartening to see the support that we got from high level folks within the department. Our deputy secretary gave opening remarks, our undersecretary gave opening remarks, and as well as people engaged in the work. We had myriad of special envoys, 4 to 5, come and speak to the work that this team that you're looking at had already been doing. And what that did for us was lend a sense of sort of legitimacy within the building. I will say this, I think that when you start talking to the folks engaged in this work, people are very inclined to say, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Right? When you start talking to folks who do negotiation, it feels almost like a given that they would have support in this capacity. But I think that the want really is the increased awareness that this exists. Like, for example, there were some years ago, I was having dinner with the former National Security Advisor, and I was like very eager about this work. Like, we need to collapse this binary, this needs to happen. And they looked at me and they said, that's not already occurring. And for me, that was quite telling, because again, it feels like a given for a lot of people. People are immensely receptive. So part of what we are trying to do now is post the internal launch to get the word out via the work that we do, but also via in-person meeting, one-on-one, so that people know that we exist and that we're here to support. And again, once they see us, I think people are excited, but it's a question of increasing awareness. And then I don't know, team, if you have any other thoughts on this.
I think you've captured it. I mean, when we have made people aware of the existence of the unit and the work that we do and what it means, I think sometimes it takes a moment for people to understand, just because it is a new unit in the department, but the reception has been overwhelmingly positive, and the inflow of work has been intense in a very good way. So no, it's been a very positive response.
Okay, great. So that, I think, we also always think that just because you build it, it happens. And so there's a lot of internal work, I know, that needs to get done. And also remembering that a lot of people, a lot of foreign service officers might not have served in a conflict affected or fragile state, as opposed to USA. Most countries that we're working in, or that they're working in, are sliding into conflict or coming out, but that's not the case, because the State Department works everywhere. So it just shows how critical the work is, but also the marketing of it. Okay, so let's step back. And I know we've talked a little bit about it, but how did the creation of NSU come about? And really, if you can just talk a little bit more about what was that gap identified, and how, and if there's anything else you want to say about how the unit will really address that gap.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm probably going to be brief here and turn it over to Tyler, who might have a little bit more institutional memory around this. But in short, people have been thinking about this for a while and figuring out the how, right? I think there were pockets of people who understood the need, and the how was really the question. And so after, I think, several iterations of this, we landed on the NSU model as the best way to go about executing this work. But I do want to turn to Tyler, because I think you might have some more institutional memory in terms of sort of how we came to this point. So Tyler, go ahead.
Thanks so much. And again, I want to thank AFP for hosting. We really appreciate it. So yeah, as you mentioned, we're not the first people to identify this need. There's many folks that are on the line have written articles and op-eds about the need for peace process support capacity, centralized capacity in the State Department. There's also other international entities that have this type of unit, the UN, the European Union, various other individual governments have this type of capacity. So we drew lessons learned from those models, and also looked at areas where we've learned from how the State Department does business on these issues. And our bureau, CSO, has been engaged on conflict prevention and conflict resolution issues since our beginning. And so we've been able to attempt or try various approaches to this effort. In fact, many of our team members were hired on as peace process and negotiations experts before the unit itself was created, because we knew that this capacity was needed. And basically where we've landed and where we have found the best model for this is by essentially acting in a service provision capacity for our frontline diplomats, for our top level diplomats in the field, engaged in peace negotiations. And from there we just do good work. Like the whole structure of our team is to provide value to those groups. In past models and in what we've learned from our counterparts around the world, sort of mandating working with us doesn't quite work. There's various other ways to do it, and we have found that just by having a centralized team of known experts in the field to engage on this stuff and have them just answer questions, make ourselves available to our frontline diplomats has been the best way forward, and we're seeing a lot of traction there. It's interesting to see how the traction has increased. When we were pre-internal launch, we were engaged on a range of different country topic areas. Then we had our internal launch, and we saw even more, as Megan mentioned, and now we're in full swing now with this public launch, and we're so happy to be in that space. So I hope that helps give some clarity on our history. Thanks.
So I just want to say, you guys keep saying other people wrote about this and other people, this isn't the first idea, but you've done it. So I mean, that's, again, take it. That's an incredible win, and we're thrilled with it. So That's a big part of it. So when we're talking about it, you've done it, you've built this now. What does it look like in practice? And how will you ensure the lessons are getting learned, and knowing that there has been success, but again, what does it really look like operationally?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's one that we get often. So I'll kick us off, but I will also open it up to the team. So this is a swing capability, as Megan alluded to. We are currently operating on demand, right? So quite frankly, folks who are engaged in negotiations, be they special envoys, be they ambassadors, foreign service officers, people who are engaged in negotiations, are privy to our work because of past history, because of colleagues mentioning, and then they solicit our support. And the team provides many types of support. The way that I conceptualized it, and forgive me if it's a bit rudimentary, quite frankly, for an audience of experts, but the way that I like to conceptualize it to folks is it often falls in 3 buckets. So there is sort of the behind the negotiating table work. There's the bucket of behind the table work, where we are advising folks on all things related to substance and or process, right? So what does it mean if you have myriad stakeholders? How are you engaging them and in what order? What does the agenda look like? What does it mean to deal with a potential spoiler? How are we defining success in this moment? Like, what does a peace process look like? What does a national dialogue look like? So really helping the people who are engaged in negotiation behind the table before they begin their negotiation. And then the second bucket is the sort of across the table support that we give. So when you have those individuals, the actual humans sitting at the proverbial negotiating table, how do we best support them in real time? And so, as this unit develops and grows, like, God willing, we'd be able to sort of embed in special envoy teams. Currently, what happens is we actually do have other members of CSO, oftentimes part of various teams, and they are intimately linked to the NSU. Like, that collaboration and conversation is ongoing. Like, God bless these humans. They are responding to calls and requests all the time. And that's a core component of what we do, that sort of real-time support. And the last bit, forgive the hackneyed metaphor, is sort of the once the table has been cleared, how do we support in the implementation of a negotiated agreement, right? So you have a negotiated agreement. Is it clear? Is it firm? Is it implementable? Oh, also, how does that translate into a constitution? The NSU also supports in that as well. So those are the buckets, and then there are the modalities, which can take myriad forms, which is why they're able to do all the work that they do. It could take the form of, as I noted, an embed on one end. It could also take the form of responding to a request via email, right? There's a full spectrum of types of support or the modality of the support that we give. But I think in summation, those buckets and those modalities encapsulate the crux of the work. Team, what did I miss?
Thank you. You definitely captured the structure and sort of how we operate and the things that we operate, the things that we work on. Maybe I'll just add, the where we draw sort of our lessons learned and our inputs is often deeply rooted in comparative practice, both lessons learned from previous practice of the State Department and also lessons learned in previous practice from the universe of peace, the history of peace negotiations, comparative situations, even situations that are not necessarily comparable, but there's one small component that we can draw a lesson from to apply to the current issues and challenges that we're facing. So a huge part of our unit comes from it being a hub of institutional knowledge and comparative knowledge that we can draw upon to help our frontline diplomats be thinking about these things in terms of what's been done in the past, or what lessons learned have been built there. Secondly, and another reason why we're so happy to be launching publicly today is that we see our unit as a conduit, a way to keep a channel open with both civil society and the broader community of practice, including the academic world, on peace processes, so that we're not, just relying on our finite groups, collective knowledge of the peace negotiations that we've worked on, but that we can actually tap into the full universe of understanding and knowledge about peace processes and negotiations, and also the lived experience and political wisdom of folks experiencing conflicts firsthand or from conflict communities themselves. So, or conflict affected communities themselves. So thank you for that.
Okay, so I'm going to ask I'm going to get to the how to, community of practice and CSOs can engage on this. But before that, I just want to pull one other thread. You all, obviously, technically are, just off the charts qualified, and the work that, you all have been doing, professionally. But this is also going to succeed by how, you work with other agencies, because it's not just the State Department there, right? It's USAID, it's DOD, it's the NSC. So how will you collaborate? And not from a technical perspective, but what are some of the challenges, and how do you think you can overcome them, pulling in other agencies? And also, what will you do when you kind of hit a bump, when, you're not able to get people to, to work with you, and not from a technical perspective, but really looking at it from a, you're talking about getting people on the ground to, end conflict, but how do you do that even within the interagency? Because we know that can be a block sometimes.
It's a great point. Whenever you're trying to get an amalgam of humans to do anything in concert, like, God bless you. So it's a very good question. I will say that a lot of this is done on a case-by-case basis, right? Depending on the context and what stakeholder we're talking about within the USG, there's different levels of receptivity and potential collaboration there. But do we seek to, and do we successfully work with our interagency partners? For sure, for sure. I think, harkening back to a point that was made earlier, once people are privy to what it is we're doing, there's an appetite for it. We are trying to seek to shape diplomatic interventions and support our policy work, but we're, again, key part of this is support. There is no desire to be, adversarial dynamic, and there just, quite frankly, hasn't been to date. It has been, I think, a really collaborative space, and it's been a joy to be able to be working community and in tandem with others. I will also say that the team on a real day-to-day level experiences the potential for this collaboration and what it looks like. And I'm happy to turn it over to you guys if you have any additional thoughts around that very important question.
I would just add, yes, Liz, the bureaucracy is real. You've experienced it in USAID, and as Ariel said, we really do engage on a case-by-case basis. And my experience has been, sometimes it does take a moment. The type of information that we are, introducing into the policy space can be new in some of the conversations that we have. And so, we do have to take some time to introduce the expertise, where we're coming from, and what background we bring to be able to, to introduce this information into the conversation. Once that's done, the collaboration has been really positive, and being able to figure out how we can introduce information that informs our policy, our diplomacy, our strategy in different situations. And so again, it's on a case-by-case basis. You have different actors in different countries, different US government actors in different countries. Policy conversations for different countries are frequently siloed. And so, we spend a lot of time building relationships throughout the interagency in order to, make sure that people understand where we're coming from and what we're bringing to the conversation. But once done, again, we have been receiving requests for engagement, conversations, inputs from folks around the interagency, and we have active conversations in a number of locations, and how we can work collaboratively with USAID, or how we can inform NSC conversations. And so, managing the interagency conversation and managing the bureaucracy is something that we do think about. It's something you have to think about being in the department. But overall, I think that on a case-by-case basis, the reception has been overall really positive. And as we have our thing that we do. It's a little bit different than what other people are doing throughout the interagency. And so this new type of expertise in the department is really helping to I think, inform those strategies and that policy and that diplomacy. And again, really positive reception on the countries that we have been working on and engaging on. Over.
So I think you both hit the nail on the head. It's about building relationships within the State Department and within the interagency. And so it's really heartening to hear, because I think also this can help other processes along the way as well. But I think, you know, building relationships inside is such a key part of this that goes beyond the technical work. So it's really, again, really heartened to hear that. And know that that's a big part of this process too. Okay, so we're gonna now talk about, I know many folks here on this call, this negotiation support network, and how can, you know, how can the community of practice engage with the NSU? And you know, what is this network?
So it's a wonderful question. One of the sort of core principles of the work that we do, be it explicit or tacit, is that this sort of work necessitates the collective brilliance of all the humans who are thinking about conflict. We would be remiss if we suggested that sort of it ended with the NSU. Obviously it doesn't. It doesn't end with the NSU, the department, the US government. Like, when we're thinking about such complex issues, we need all the humans who are thinking about it to weigh in, and we need their contributions. So what we imagine the NSN doing is being a space for experts outside of government, for the community of practice to be in conversation with the NSU, right? So who are the practitioners, who are the academics who are thinking about a particular issue set, be it a thematic question, like what do we mean when we say inclusion in peace processes, or a country/regional issue set? What are they thinking? What work are they doing? How might we enhance? What does collaboration look like? How do we share information? So our goal here is to really bring in the collective brilliance, if you will, to not be siloed, so that we are in constant conversation with the other people who are thinking about these really, really complex issue sets. And I want to say, Amy has been stellar at thinking about this. And so I would be remiss if I didn't invite her to add some color that I inevitably missed.
Sure, thank you. And just joining everyone, to want to thank AFP for hosting this public launch. So Ariel has already touched upon, I'll try to fill out a little bit more and we can back and forth to share. So this is the official public announcement of the Negotiation Support Network. And when we're done, I'm actually going to drop a link into the chat for those who are interested in joining. We'll do that when we pause for the Q&A. So as was mentioned before, we know that there is this incredible well of knowledge and expertise out there within the community of practice. And our goal through the NSN, or the network, is to tap into this and to provide an opportunity for civil society, the community of practice, to inform US policy, to inform our recommendations, to inform the sorts of work that we're doing. Again, repeating, but I think it bears repeating, that our vision is to engage with those who are already doing the work in a specific country or on a specific problem set. And then for us, through, again, we're going to ask folks to fill out this form, by having you all self-identifying and saying, we are working on this, we want to engage with you, we want to be a part of it. It will help us to know very succinctly, where does the expertise lie? And then make it a lot easier for us to engage the right individuals and the right organizations at the right time, that we can do speedy analysis and bring this in, as everyone in the peace building and let's say peace building community or practice knows, especially today, these things move quickly, and it will help us to be able to pull the right people in at the right time in a timely manner. I want to be really, really clear that our goal is not to create any new work. We're not tasking people to go do something for us. Rather, we want to hear from those who are already deeply steeped in the field. Lastly, for clarity's sake, I want to be very clear about what the network is not. We are not a funding mechanism. This is not an advisory board or a formal coordination mechanism. It is simply our effort to engage the collective brilliance, the collective knowledge of the community of practice, and all of you who are already doing great work in this field. Thanks.
So thank you for that. And as you were talking, I was already starting to go through some of the questions that are in the chat, because a lot questions around local civil society. How do you bring them into this? How, we know track one and how the State Department is diplomats, are focusing in on track one, but what about track two and track three? And how does this work get brought into this? What does that look like? And then, and I think you already talked about the next steps on the network. So I don't know if we need to say anything more about that. You're going to drop a link in, but really focus in a little bit more on this track two, track three, local civil society. So
yeah, that's so I will say, Amy, do we feel like we've got there's clarity around the network? I want to make sure, because this is I will say this is the people that we want tapped into said network. So we're like hammering it.
Right. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. That is one of my questions, but I'm, already starting to get into the questions in the chat. So are we clear on that? Of how the network functions, how people get involved? Amy, you think we feel we did that?
I mean, I hope we are. Like, to reiterate, sorry, I would realize you were looking to me to respond to that. I actually
say it again for the people in the back, Amy.
Yeah.
I actually thought the question was being asked to the audience. Like, are you clear? Are you good?
Is everybody clear?
So just to reiterate, we exist. There is a form. I'm going to drop the form in the chat. Fill out the form, send it to us. We will know that you are there. I will just take a moment just to 100% clear. What we're asking folks to do, we're doing this through organizations that will have people fill out their organization, our primary point of contact, and then within the form, there are 2 areas of expertise that we would love, again, to be able to really identify. The first area are more the thematic. Ceasefires, conflict-related sexual violence, national dialogue, so on and so forth. I think we have like 20 to 30 different areas where, and you can click all the ones with whom your organization has specific expertise and experience. Below that, there's going to be an area, or there is an area where it's clicking off regions. And at the very bottom, and I really want to stress this, in addition to saying what clicking the particular regions in which you engage, there is something at the very bottom where it says particular countries of expertise. When we are engaging on a country-specific problem set, it is going to be very helpful for us to know who is already on the ground in said country, who are the folks that are bringing that specific country experience in addition to those who are engaged in a particular region. So again, I will drop it in when we get to the audience Q&A. But is that clear, Liz? Do you think there's anything else?
I think that's clear.
Okay,
I think that's clear. And I also want to say you mentioned this long list of different expertise. And one thing that I think is really important is if something is not on there that people think needs to be on there, tell people. I know I have been a big pain in pushing the neuroscience and the trauma and the brain science. Big shout out to Beyond Conflict. I hope Tim Phillips is here and Mari Fitzstuff. But that's an example. Like, I've been really pushing that work with you all. So, if people don't see, if something is not there, also let you all know. And I just also want to give a big shout out to Megan Crotto, who's the director of policy and advocacy at AFP, who has been working on this so closely with you all. And feel free for people to reach out to her, and she can also communicate in with the folks at the NSU as well. So just want to say that. Okay, so I think we've gotten the next steps, how this is going to work. I want to go back to that track 2 and 3, because we know track 1 is important, and that's really the State Department, but USAID is working on the track 2 and the track 3. And also, and I learned this from PILPG, from Megan and others, that track 1.5. A lot of times negotiations break down because people sitting at the table don't know about all the things that go in, about DDR, and so they get up and walk away because they just don't know. And these are those, I call them the ear whisperers. They're the us people, right? They're the people that are sitting behind the principals who are actually doing the negotiation. So that track 1.5, that track 2, that track 3, how is this part of this? And this is really where a lot of the organizations that are here are, most interested in.
It's a really great question, and I have some thoughts, but I think I'll turn it over to Tyler to hit on this first. So Tyler, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think it's potentially maybe an institutional myth that the State Department only does track 1 negotiations, like where we have embassies and diplomats in field. It's their job, right, to engage with as many people as possible that are relevant to the conflict, but they also have a lot of other things on their plate as well as our frontline diplomats in embassies and such. So a big part of our role is to continue pushing the intense importance, right, of track 2 and track 3 initiatives, to really highlight the strategic value, right, of being more inclusive in peace processes, including civil society, including track 2 and track 3 actors as much as possible in our engagement on peace processes and negotiations. And then third, one of the purposes, one of the points of the network is to be more engaged with folks who are sort of in the know about who the best folks we should be engaging with, which folks should we be working with our frontline diplomats on connecting to peace processes, who we might see as an essential voice that's not being included at this particular moment, either in the fog of war, so to speak, or the fog of peace negotiation, or in the rush of a track 1 process coming together. We want to make sure that those voices are heard, and that our frontline policymakers and frontline diplomats are understanding that strategic value for both achieving peace and for achieving U.S. interests in deeply engaging on track 2, track 3, track 1.5 issues, and also bringing in civil society voices. Now, to the State Department's credit, right, and our frontline diplomats' credit, they have been doing that, thus far. And so we see our goal, our purpose, as sort of an amplification or a feedback loop on the value, the proven evidence-based value of that inclusion piece and the track 2 and track 3 pieces. Thanks.
If I could just jump.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no,
You go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Liz. I wanted to just jump in here and pull a thread. I think part of what we're talking about also is what do we mean by inclusion and equity in our peace processes? And then how do we operationalize it? And so I would say I would be remiss if I did not emphasize that we come to this with an immense amount of humility and curiosity. I will repeat, we come to this with an immense amount of humility and curiosity, because this is frontier. In my estimation, this work in particular is frontier work. There is ongoing conversation, as you all know, the discourse is quite vibrant right now, and I'm heartened to hear it and to be a part of it around, okay, how do we make our processes more equitable and more inclusive? So then my question becomes, okay, are we talking about process? What does an inclusive and equitable process look like, right? Are we talking about agenda? Are we talking about what stakeholders are present? Are we talking about decision-making mechanism? Are we talking about all of it? But then also, are we talking about the substance of the agreement? How are we thinking about inclusion and equity in the substance of negotiated agreements? These are core questions that, in my estimation, have yet to be answered, or at least have not been answered by this team, and we know that. And that's where there is a call to action to the folks who are listening in, because this is a place where we really need collective brilliance, thoughts, ideas. And I will say this, it will be iterative, it will be fluid. We will continue to learn, because it is core and key to what we do. We fundamentally believe that durable peace necessitates equity and inclusion. That is axiomatic to us. But the how, that's where the learning comes in. And that's where we want to be highly, highly collaborative.
So you read my mind because that was my question I was going to ask you. So
Oh,
on
no.
inclusion,
Sorry.
no, it's okay, but that was the question I was going to ask you about inclusion. So you read my mind. And Megan Corrado would be very upset with me if I don't ask about WPS. How are you going to be linking this with other laws, with the Women, Peace, and Security agenda? And we know agreements where women are involved are more sustainable. So how do you see you actually making the case for that, operationalizing it, linking in with other laws that are already out there?
I mean, it's a great question, and I know the team has been doing a lot of work. So I will turn it over to Amy in a second. I will say that upfront, our work fits under the pillar of women's participation and peace and related political processes. Excuse me. So the nodal point, the linkage, it is there. That is not in any way attenuated. I will also say that I think one of the things that the team has been trying to really tap into and sort of understand better is what does this look like in the context of intersectionality. And so oftentimes what I have heard in the discourse, and sometimes the way folks are thinking about it, is that we'll talk about women as a monolith. And we all know that that's wholly erroneous, right? There are women who are also women of color. There are women who are elite. There are women who are part of the working poor. There are women who are part of religious minorities. Right? So even understanding the intersectional nature of womanhood is something that, again, frontier work, and that we are trying to figure out how to operationalize inclusion, noting the complexity of it. I will say, though, that I have been really humbled to see the work of this team in advancing this, right? They are not deterred by the complexity of it. And I would love to actually just invite Amy to speak to some of this, because she has been spearheading it.
Thank you so much. And I'm really glad that you addressed the intersectionality point. I'm going to give a little more specifics, Liz, to your question, but I would be remiss. I'm going to harken back to an earlier question where you asked about interagency cooperation. I have to give a shout out to my incredible interagency colleagues within the department, within USAID, at DOD, and the NSC. One of my favorite things about being at the State Department are engaging with these internal, like these government community of practices, the people that care about gender, the people that care about WPS, the people that care about gender and sexual minorities and LGBTQI+, and disability rights and ethnic and minority rights and faith-based international religious freedom rights. There are so many great people within the interagency with whom we are already engaging. And what you had talked about before in terms of building those relationships, we've been doing that since day one. We cannot do our work in a bubble. We cannot do it in some ivory tower. We have to be engaged and really on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. I'm talking to folks in the Office of Global Women's Issues, the Bureau for Democracy, Human Rights and Labor, USAID, NSC. I mean, these are folks who are bringing in their own experience and collective brilliance. And what we want to do now is take what we're already doing within the interagency and do it more externally with the peace building community of practice. So I just wanted to take those threads and tie them together, because I firmly believe we cannot succeed unless we do this in community. We have to be supporting one another. We have to be learning from one another. I love, one of my favorite things about Ariel is her emphasis on humility and what we do not know. And we are asking for your help in the same way that we ask for help and we ask for support from others. So within that general framing, I'm going to say a little bit more about WPS. But in terms of the nuts and bolts about how does this actually work, in part, we're doing it through comparative analysis. So for example, I know a lot of people who are familiar with the Columbia peace process. In 2016, women negotiators backed by women's civil society leaders pushed for more inclusive measures rather than an elite bargain. And more specifically, they focused it on targeted measures that would address economic disparities and the inclusion of rural populations, which focused on the root causes of violence. Doing this gender analysis, comparative analysis, bringing these lessons learned into the recommendations and analysis that we're doing for other countries. This is one very important way that we are bringing this into, we're making it real. We're trying to really give it legs. I also want to say that it's not only gender analysis, but specifically a gender analysis of conflict lens, that we start there in terms of defining the problem set and then using that to make recommendations. I also want to acknowledge, I'm not sure if this has already come up, but that not only are we advocating for inclusion in terms of our international partners and what we're seeing at the peace table, but also in terms of US negotiating parties. We talk about this too, and this is not just an external thing. We want for us to do it. We want for us to do it as well as others. And then lastly, again, I'm just going to mention again that on WPS, we have great just gratitude for the Office of Global Women's Issues at the State Department, who are our partners, and we work very, very closely when it comes to implementing WPS. So with that, I'll hand it back over.
Okay, so thanks. So, really now just getting into the questions, and we've been talking about them. So, but I really want to pull out a lot of the questions in the chat because they're just phenomenal. And I love this question. As a peace building community, we struggle to communicate, especially externally, what exactly peace building is and how to package the importance of prevention. So what in your communication, what are your approaches to communicating about prevention, and especially with USG colleagues that, might not think it's that important?
It's a great question. I will say quite briefly, it's going to feel somewhat generic, but it's true. Humans love a story. And so I think what can often happen is when you are an expert, you can get bogged down in, I'm a lawyer, so I'll say lawyers get bogged down in legalese, right? And peace process experts potentially get bogged down and said sort of in the nuance of the language, which is so important for a very particular audience. But when you are trying to show the importance of the work, because it is critical, right? The work that you all do is critical. Tell the story. Tell the story. It started here, and then this happened, and as a result of said intervention, X, Y, and Z occurred or didn't occur, right? And I think there's so much power in that because humans want to understand the human impact of the work. And this work in particular has such immense, and the potentiality for such immense impact that I think sharing stories is a potential entry point. Again, a little bit generic, but I don't think that negates the truth of it. And team, you all have been doing a lot of this communication. So what's worked in your experience?
I might jump in here. I think there's two things. I mean, I think we all know watching this space that, we focus on a crisis, that the international community will focus on a crisis and then move on usually. And one of the things that we note is that if we just put a little more work into figuring out how to do things better now, that we can stop this, we can help to prevent the cyclical, return to violence in the future. So, noting just sort of how building a better agreement now can help, to prevent a potential return to violence in the future. We know that lots of peace agreements fail. We know that it's, frequently it's a long process to get to a sustainable peace, but thinking about sort of just putting in a little bit more effort now and thinking through and helping them to think through what specifically that means, giving them the, frequently it's not because people are not interested in doing the work or not interested in creating a sustainable peace. Sometimes it's that the definition going is just to create an elite bargain, and that's the understanding. And so helping to, we define both, you will frequently have, and again, we're working in the State Department, so you will frequently have track one actors speaking in some sort of situation, but helping various groups to understand within our policy process to understand that we do have a much broader process. A peace process can be much bigger, and there can be lots more opportunities through the negotiation, through public consultations, through bringing in civil society during the actual negotiations, through implementation, other opportunities to bring in different groups and have a much more inclusive process. So thinking through sort of what peace building means in the terms of a peace process and a context, and giving people who are interested and engaged, but maybe just haven't worked on this before, some of the language and the tools and the information that they need to be able to advance this does help to move this forward, because it's not, we find that there is a lot of interest. The reception to talking about peace building, to talking about inclusion, to thinking about these topics, the reception is really positive. People understand and frequently want to advance these issues, but sometimes it is not knowing how to articulate it, not knowing how to operationalize it, as we've talked about. And so helping to give them tools, just based on this is our job, this is what we do day in and day out, is to think about these issues. And so helping to give tools for them to know how to advance these issues in their day jobs. And this is why, as we've said, we want to tap into this brilliance of this community also, because we know that there are things that we don't know. And so the more that we can tap into what people are learning about, how to operationalize, how to think about these issues, how to build upon, the things that we have learned in our careers, helps us to advance that and to give our colleagues in the department the language, the tools, the justifications, the understanding that that can support them. They are interested, they do want to do it, but we don't expect for everybody to have a career's worth of knowledge about peace building, about peace processes, if that's not what they've done in their career. So those are some of the approaches that we have been using inside the department. Over.
So thank you for that. And just to put a plug in there, Partners Global, Humanity United, AFP with Frameworks Institute has been doing a lot on narrative research. And one of the things that we have, the stories are critical, not just starting off with the problem, because then people get overwhelmed and depressed, and really focusing in on the solutions and how to move forward. And it sounds easy to do, but it's actually quite hard, because people still want to move back into the problem set. So I'm really, again, heartened to hear that. Okay, a couple of questions that have come in around connecting with multilaterals like the UN. I know you've mentioned this as well. Can you talk about some of the work that you've done with them? I'm also going to ask another question that came up. So one is the multilateral, and again, I'm just going to give a shout out for the Global Fragility Act. Big part of the Global Fragility Act is working with other multilateral, bilateral donors. Past experience. This office has been, this unit has been building, and this is the big public launch, but can you point to anything in the past that CSO has done and how this was built on in terms of a success story that you have? And also, pulling out of the question, how are you going to measure this? What have you already started pulling out some indicators, both qualitative and quantitative, and what does success look like? So multilateral, connections, evidence, and past success story. Go.
Go. Easy peasy. Liz, what? No, just kidding. No, this is great. Okay. A couple of things. I have some sort of high level thoughts to some of this. Team, you just jump on in. Don't even wait for an invitation. Okay. So first, the multilateral work, yes, 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 and yes. It is core to everything that we do and seek to do. That said, I think that dynamic, you all, team, correct me if I am misrepresenting, it is budding, right? That is work that we want to grow. We have begun inside the building our coordination and work with the relevant bureaus, if you will. And also, is there more to be done? For sure. And that is like key to next steps, because there is a mediation support unit within the UN, right? Like the idea for collaboration there in and of itself feels like a given. And so I will say more to come. Noted, it is budding, more to come on that. Past experience and success, yes, completely correct. As we noted, there is nothing new under the sun. There are a lot of brilliant humans who have been thinking about how we go about doing this within the USG, within this building, within the world. And so I will turn it actually over to the team to talk about past successes, with the caveat that, as you know, just sometimes it's tougher to talk about regional dynamics in light of the work that we do and the sensitivities there. So team who has been doing this work, please feel free to chime in. I will leave that there. Measuring success. It's such a good question. What is a good outcome in a negotiation, in this work? I will say that the team that you are looking at is actually housed within our design, monitoring, and evaluation office. And so thinking about learning and evaluation is a core component of what we do. But again, this is part of the work, right? Now that we have launched, a core component of institutionalization is identifying what those indicators are, making sure that they are fluid and are ever evolving to context, but also that we are making sure that we are having an impact as we define it. So that to me also feels like budding work, if you will, but it is definitely top of mind. So I've given my bits to this team. It's a three-pronged question. So I'm going to turn it over to you all and make sure you just identify which prong you're answering.
Yeah.
So I can start with the indicators piece, and then maybe you can transition to the multilateral piece where Megan can jump in on some of those. So on the indicators, as we mentioned, and sort of as we've described to you all, this has been a phased process, right? So we had our internal launch. Now we're having our external launch. Where we're introducing this component of engaging with the community of practice. Our indicators are similar to that, right? So we have a set of indicators that we have as a unit, right, for how whether we're getting traction within the department, within the interagency. So that's our sort of first set of indicators, which has everything to do with whether or not we're being used within the department in the way that we're supposed to. The great news is that those indicators look great at this point. The second set of indicators are related to country and regional specific level problem sets, and those are a bit more complicated because that involves more than just CSO, right? So that's collaborating with our regional counterparts to make sure regional counterparts within the U.S. government, making sure that some of these peace building pieces, these pieces related to successful inclusive peace processes, are built into U.S. policy, country-specific policy, and things like that. We've had pretty good traction in the first couple of months with that on a couple of country portfolios. So that's been great. In the future, in the near future, we're hoping to also look at indicators related to whether or not peace processes are hitting some of these inclusion pieces, and whether or not the U.S.'s role in peace processes hit on those types of things, which is something that we'd be happy to talk with this community and with the network about, and also takes some more work on the country level to make sure that those things get in there. So that's sort of an overview of how we're viewing the ways that we can measure success, some of which are directly in our control, some of which are more about sort of whether the entire ecosystem is working in the most positive way when it comes to peace building. I'll mention one piece about the multilateral bit, and then I'll kick it over to Megan. So as we mentioned, the CSO has used a couple of different approaches to this capacity before landing on the unit itself. So we have been in touch with the EU's mediation capacity in the EEAS, with their community of practice. We've done several trips and meetings about learning from their approaches. Same with the mediation support unit up at the UN. And now that we have formally launched, we're really looking forward to that. Deepening those relationships as an official unit. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. I'll jump in on some of the past work and the successes as well. As we have said multiple times throughout this conversation, this is not the first time this has been tried. This is there has been past work in the department to try and establish this type of unit. Some of that in CSO itself, and I myself have been with CSO for 3 years as of last week, doing this type of work. So, so this didn't just start last month, but the creation of this unit and this sort of permanent hub of knowledge is what is new here. In terms of past effort, some of the things that we've really looked at that were very successful for CSO as a bureau, and for engaging and supporting the U.S. government efforts in peace processes. One of those things is CSO has a very long history of seconding people or detailing people to special envoys offices. This is something that we have done for years and years, and really we have heard from a number of people just how successful it has been to have a CSO or sometimes more than one in those special envoys offices to be able to tap into the type of knowledge that exists within the bureau, because this is a bureau that has the staff is people who focus on conflict and conflict resolution and stabilization, and have field experience, have been in countries in conflict, many of them, and so being able to have CSO have people in special envoys offices has been a great model, and it's something that we absolutely want to build on in terms of the function and sort of how we institutionalize and operationalize the units. Something else that we have had a lot of success with, at least in my time and working with Tyler over the years and Amy, is really in how we focus on the type of advice that we give, and giving our colleagues the knowledge and options and sort of the information so that when they approach a problem set, they feel like they have more information or the information that they need to be able to engage effectively. And so that's another thing that we've really tried to build upon, is not just to say, here's what you need to do. Right. Sometimes we get asked what we should do. And in that case, we're a little more pointed, but frequently the point is not to say, here is the path forward, because in these situations, we all know that it's complex and there's not just one path forward. There's not just one way to operationalize inclusion. And so giving our colleagues the information and the understanding of places, outside of their regional expertise. So maybe if we're working on a problem set, a conflict or a negotiation in the Middle East, but we're bringing in examples from Colombia or Guatemala, that maybe the people at the table haven't worked on. So really giving them information from other places outside of their area of expertise, that's really been helpful. And then also coming in early and on strategy. So really thinking sort of at the, as early as we can get into and get that ask from our regional colleagues to engage, helping to think, from the start on strategy so that we can help to build a whole process, as opposed to just answering one-off questions later when a process has already been developed. And so again, depending on the role that the U.S. government is playing, which can be very different in very different contexts, but just helping to get in early and to be able to make sure that the U.S. government is asking the right questions, looking at the right comparative examples, things like that. We have found that is also really helpful. So I know that doesn't speak to specific country context, but in terms of how we're thinking about this work and how we engage, those are some of the things that we are really looking to build upon success. Over.
Okay, so can I just follow up on that? You don't have to name the country. You can sanitize the example as much as you can, but give us an example of something there was like an aha moment, of some of the work.
Yeah, I mean, one country that we are still working on and still going on, one of the things that I think has been really influential is that we started introducing ideas and comparative examples almost a year ago, thinking about sort of what ceasefires might look like, what some of these other processes might look like, putting information into through the National Security Council process, things like that. And at the time people were like, yeah, why are we talking about this now? It's not right. But as the process has moved forward and as the conflict has ebbed and flowed, people are like, oh yeah, that paper from 6 months ago. Oh yeah, I already have the information that I need as these questions come up. We can tailor it to the, country context, specifics change. But I think that because we know from our experience working on so many of these different conflicts and negotiations that no, the situation isn't right now, but we need to start thinking about this now before this issue pops. And so that aha moment where everyone was like, oh, you knew you knew that this was going to be something that we needed to think about. Oh, we have the information already that we need. We have documents prepared. I think that that has been really gratifying, and thinking through sort of, how we can engage and again, prepare our colleagues so that they have details that they need.
Okay, so thank you for that. Okay, so when you have gotten the request, I'm not going to ask the exact question, but there were, have you been, asked to look at some of the multilateral, higher profile conflicts, that have been going on in the last, bit? Or, have you been asked to look at more of internal civil wars? Where's the bulk of the requests been coming in from?
I'll jump in quite quickly and say all of the above.
Okay.
I think that we've been asked to engage across the spectrum of types of conflict, be they internecine or we're talking international. I think we've been privy to a lot of those conversations. Yeah, I think that's as much as we can give there, but
Okay.
all of the above.
All of the above.
I'll just
Okay.
note,
Sorry.
yeah, we worked on about 30 different country contexts in the last year.
Okay, how many people are in this unit?
We are at 3 right now, and we are working to expand and grow.
Sleep?
We don't sleep. As I'm telling you, it's insane. Small but mighty, which is partially why a goal of mine and a shared goal, institutionalizing and growing. The demand is there. The demand is there, and they're doing phenomenal work.
Okay, so obviously, there's resources that have to be there. How has Congress been open to this? Have you been in discussions with them? However, they open to it?
So I will speak as a former congressional staffer. We have had the opportunity to brief Congress a couple of times now, and the reception has been quite warm.
Okay.
People are very, again, I mean, I think it is one of those things. I sound like a broken record, but I think it's one of those things where you start explaining what we do, and people either say, duh, or I can't believe that's not happening already. And so I think the onus is really on us and to this community to continue to sort of talk about the importance of this work, to let people know that it exists. But when we have engaged with our friends on the Hill, the reception has been quite positive. Yeah.
And absolutely. I mean, that's the one thing, I'll just say on these issues, I am, we talk about it, we're fortunate. We get incredible bipartisan support. So, and really focusing in on this conflict prevention, all you have to look at is the Global Fragility Act, WPS, atrocity prevention. I mean, and so this is really critical. So I encourage people when they are educating folks on the Hill to make sure that they talk about the importance of this. Okay, so I talked about neuroscience and trauma and how important that is, even just for people that are in the negotiating space. A question came in around mis and disinformation. We're seeing this so much in Ukraine right now. How is this, and again, 10 years ago wasn't a thing. How does this play into your work and how you're working on it?
I will say that I'm going to turn it over to Amy, but I think it's important to just note that the work of the unit is a matrix approach within the Bureau. So we work obviously very closely with others in the Bureau who are thinking about key issue sets such as misinformation and disinformation. We also engage with the rest of the department in the USG on this. And so we are tracking these things and figuring out how to best sort of shape our processes as a result is an intra-Bureau effort. But Amy, please feel free to jump in.
I'll say one thing, and actually I'm going to turn to Tyler for the disinformation piece. I really appreciated, Liz, this is going back to an earlier comment, when you were talking about narrative. I attended PeaceCon, and thank you and to USIP for hosting PeaceCon. That was just an amazing collection of speakers and thoughts and ideas. And I actually attended the session on narrative. and was really, really struck by what was being shared. And so that's just kind of a nod to, we are thinking about that. I don't think that we have answers, but the important thing is to acknowledge what are the obstacles, what are the barriers, and then again, to tap into what is the work currently being done that we can then hopefully incorporate into our ongoing work. So it's interesting. I'm realizing that one of the things missing on the form is narrative. We captured trauma-informed approaches. we captured many things, but note to self, add that to the form. We will put that in the other category. Please feel free. We actually have left an other line. So if people see something that's missing, this is great. And again, I'm going to turn to Tyler in a sec, but one of the things that we hope to do through the Negotiation Support Network is not only are we going to have, we plan to have sessions where we're talking about what we're thinking about, I also hope maybe, again, throwing it out maybe once or twice a year, where we have a session that says, what are we missing? Is there something that has not even come across our radar that we should be talking about, and allow that exchange back and forth? So I think that there are a number of categories. Actually, let me say this differently. This field is evolving. We are truly evolving. And no one entity, no one organization, no one person has all of the insight, especially when things are moving so fast. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tyler to speak on the decision.
I'm actually going to have to interrupt. I've been a terrible moderator because we're at time, but I've been so passionate and excited in getting to all these questions. We're a couple minutes over. So I just want to say, thank you so much for this incredible conversation. And I just want to ask, Deputy Assistant Secretary Ariel, how do you want to close this? How do you want to, what's your last pitch you want to make?
Can we not
Just
close?
The last pitch.
I know, I don't want to close. No, let's have this conversation forever. No, I will close. I'll say this. I will say thank you. Thank you for the space. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the beginning of more conversation, even just as sort of actualized or exhibited in the chat. I am the mother of a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I often tell them that one of the hardest things for humans to do is share. And I actually fundamentally believe that. I think that the human beings, we as a collective, struggle when we think about sharing resources, be they tangible or intangible. So money, power, land, access, food, water. I say that because I think conflict resolution is such critical work, and it is core to figuring out how we as a collective and as a species continue to move forward. And I don't say that lightly. And the reason I emphasize this here on this call with this group of people is because you all are critical to the success of this unit and to the advancement of conflict resolution work and peace building writ large. And so my hope for us is that this is the first of many conversations to come, and that we can use our collective brilliance to help people figure out how to share. And just thank you for the time. More to come. I'm just so grateful. So thank you, Liz. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, that's a great way to end. Thank you so much. And again, my apologies for going a couple minutes over. You can tell my excitement and passion. And thank you for everyone who stayed with us. So more to come. And again, thank you for all the work you're doing, and try to get some sleep.
Thank you so much.